She already had the pen in her hand. The farm her father built with his own 2 hands, the very land where she learned to walk, where she buried her childhood dog, where she heard her father's final words before he passed. It was about to stop being hers. The debts were simply too great. The bank wouldn't wait any longer. And God seemed silent. But that very night, as the storm fell over the dry fields, someone left something on the porch. A letter. No return address. No explanation. Only a single handwritten sentence. He trusted you. Now it's your turn. What was inside that letter would change everything. But before I tell you what she discovered, you need to understand why that farm was so much more than just land. There are moments in life when it feels like all is lost. Moments when you look at what you love most and realize you might have to let it go. This is the story of a woman who was just minutes away from giving up on her father's legacy. A woman who was tired, indebted, alone. But she discovered that sometimes, when everything seems to end, that is exactly where a miracle begins. If you believe that God still writes impossible stories, if you like stories about faith, family, and fresh starts, then subscribe to the channel now and stay with me until the end. Because what happened on that farm was no coincidence. It was purpose. Now, let me take you back to the very beginning. The funeral had ended 3 days ago, but the silence still echoed through the house. Clara walked through the empty barn, smelling the scent of old wood and dry hay. Every corner of that property carried her father's mark. His organized tools, his hat hanging on the same nail as always, his boots still caked with red earth. On his last night in the hospital, he held her hand with a strength that no longer matched his frail body. Never sell this land, my girl. This land is our history. She promised. But promises made on hospital beds don't pay bills. The drought that year had been merciless. Production dropped by half. The loan taken out to save the harvest turned into a suffocating debt. The bank letters arrived one after another. And now, sitting at the kitchen table, Clara stared at the sales contract. She didn't want to sell. But perhaps loving that land wasn't enough to save it. Outside, the wind began to blow harder, swaying the ancient trees her father had planted when she was still a child. It was as if the farm, too, was waiting for an answer. She had been praying for rain for months. But now, it wasn't the harvest she was worried about. It was the goodbye. The buyer would arrive the next morning to finalize everything. The rain, which once represented hope, now felt like irony. Too late. Always too late. The wind picked up, slamming the barn door violently. Clara ran out to make sure the animals were protected. The storm broke with force, lightning cutting through the sky like luminous cracks. Inside the barn, gripping the wood of the fence, she finally let the tears fall. I tried, Dad. I swear I tried. The thunder answered. She felt as if she were failing. Not just the farm, but the memory of the man who dedicated his entire life to that land. When she returned home, soaked to the bone, the lights flickered twice before stabilizing. The storm roared outside. Clara closed all the windows and locked the door. That's when she heard it. 3 knocks. Firm. Slow. Her heart raced. Who would be there on a night like this? She took a deep breath and walked to the door. But when she opened it, there was no one. Only the wind. And something on the porch floor. The rain was soaking half the envelope, but her name was written in bold ink, as if whoever left it there knew exactly what they were doing. Clara Whitman. No sender. No stamp. No explanation. She looked out at the road. No cars. No distant lights. Only the storm and the sound of the wind moving through the fields. Clara picked up the envelope with trembling hands and quickly closed the door. For a few seconds, she just stared at that piece of paper on the kitchen table. It could be an advertisement, or something cruel, or just a mistake. But deep down, she felt something different. Like a whisper. As if that letter had waited for the exact right moment. She finally opened it. Inside, there was only a single folded sheet. and a small, old key, attached with adhesive tape. The note said, "Your father saved my life 20 years ago. He asked me never to forget this land. If one day you thought about giving up, I was to deliver this." Below that, one last sentence. "He trusted you. Now it's your turn." And in the bottom corner, an address, a bank in the neighboring town. Clara's heart beat so hard it seemed to echo through the whole house. Who was this person? And what did that key open? The next morning, she was supposed to sign the papers. But for the first time in days, she hesitated. Clara hardly slept that night. The letter remained on the table. The small key reflected the faint kitchen light, as if it held a secret too old to be ignored. She had two choices: ignore everything and sign the papers in the morning, or discover what her father had hidden from the world, including her. The buyer would arrive at 10. At 7 in the morning, Clara was already on the road toward the neighboring town. The bank indicated in the letter was old, built of red brick, with a metal sign worn by time. It wasn't one of those big modern banks. It was small, almost forgotten. She walked in. The manager, an elderly man with white hair and a sharp gaze, seemed to recognize her before she even spoke. "You are Thomas Whitman's daughter." It wasn't a question. She simply nodded. With trembling hands, she placed the key on the counter. The man took a deep breath. "I've been waiting for this day." The manager led her to a private room. At the back was a row of old metal safety deposit boxes. He pulled one out, marked with a number that looked like it had been touched many times over the years. The key fit perfectly. The click echoed like a door being opened into the past. Inside, there were no piles of cash. There were documents, old photos, newspaper clippings, and a larger envelope with her name on it. Clara opened it. It was a letter from her father. "If you are reading this, it means you are thinking about selling the farm. And if it has come to this point, it's because I failed to protect you from the weight this land can bring." The tears began to fall before she could finish. "But I need you to know, this land was never just ours." She frowned. What did that mean? Among the documents was something unexpected. A contract, signed 20 years ago. Her father had used part of the farm as collateral to help several families in the region keep from losing their homes during a devastating agricultural crisis. He lent money. He forgave debts. He helped quietly. And he included a curious clause: "If one day my daughter is in need, each family helped shall return only one thing: support." Not money. Support. Clara felt the floor disappear beneath her feet. The manager smiled slightly. "Your father saved 7 properties back then. They all still exist. They all prospered." She could barely breathe. "Do they know?" "They know. And they knew the day might come." Clara made it back to the farm before 10. The buyer was already parked in front of the house, accompanied by his lawyer. She stepped out of the car holding the folder of documents. Her heart was racing. Her hands were cold. The man held out the final contract. "Are you ready?" Clara looked around. The house, the barn, the fields that were now wet from the rain that had finally come. Before she could answer, another car appeared on the dirt road. Then another, and another. 7 pickup trucks parked behind the first one. Men and women stepped out. Some she recognized vaguely from town. Others were just familiar faces from local fairs and churches. The first one approached. "Your father saved me when I was about to lose everything." A woman held out an envelope. "We are here to fulfill the promise." Clara looked at the buyer, then at her neighbors, then at the still cloudy sky. She wasn't alone. And for the first time since the funeral, she felt real hope. The buyer watched in silence as the 7 families approached. Each one carried something. Some brought thick envelopes, others, documents. One of them held a blue folder with old records. The first man, Mr. Miller, spoke with a firm voice. Your father lent me money when no one believed my land could produce again. He never charged interest. He only asked that I help someone else when it was my turn. He handed over an envelope. Inside was a check. Then came the Dawson family. He paid for our daughter's surgery and never told a soul. Another envelope. Another check. One by one, they all repeated stories Clara had never heard. Her father hadn't just saved properties. He saved dreams, marriages, lives. When they finished, the kitchen table was covered in envelopes. The buyer cleared his throat. Does this cover the debt? Clara looked at the lawyer, who quickly tallied the amounts. He looked up, surprised. It covers everything, and there's plenty left over. Silence filled the room. The storm had passed, and for the first time, Clara realized that the harvest her father planted wasn't corn. It was character. It was kindness. It was honor. Clara could have stopped there. The debt was paid. The farm was saved. But something inside her said that this story didn't end with just balanced numbers. She went out onto the porch. The families were gathered in the yard, looking at the earth soaked by the recent rain. Then Mr. Miller spoke again. We didn't just come to pay a debt. He pointed to the fields. We came to plant. That very afternoon, everyone started working. Tractors were brought in. Seeds were donated. Calloused hands joined together. The entire community showed up. Someone brought food. Another brought tools. Another offered free labor during the next season. It wasn't just financial help. It was collective reconstruction. Clara watched it all with tears in her eyes. She had always believed she was carrying that weight alone. But her father had built something invisible, a network of people united by gratitude. That day, she understood. The farm was never just hers. It was a symbol. And symbols don't survive because of money. They survive because of people. Months later, the fields were green again. Greener than Clara could remember in years. The harvest was abundant. News of the story spread throughout the region. But Clara never talked about miracles out loud. She knew the truth. Miracles aren't magic. They are seeds planted in silence, which bloom at the right time. One quiet morning, she walked to the old oak tree where her father used to sit at sunset. She sat there, closed her eyes. I almost sold it, Dad. The wind blew softly, like an answer. But I understand now. The land wasn't the legacy. The legacy was the love you spread. She knew now that her mission wasn't just to keep the farm. It was to continue the cycle, to help, to invest in people, to protect what truly matters. Because when you plant kindness, heaven takes care of the harvest. Sometimes we think we are losing everything. Sometimes we believe the only way out is to give up. But this story reminds us of something powerful. The good you do today can be someone's salvation tomorrow. And it can be yours, too. Maybe you are going through a storm right now. Maybe the bills are too high. Maybe hope feels small. But never underestimate the seeds you have already planted. If this story touched your heart, write in the comments, I believe in invisible harvests. And if you like stories that warm the soul and renew faith, subscribe to the channel now. Because here, every story proves one thing. When all seems lost, God is still writing the ending. See you in the next story.